Hi. Could you just introduce yourself and say a bit about who you are, please?
Of course. My name's Chris Bonello. I'm an autism advocate, so I'm autistic myself. I give a lot of speeches and training sessions about how to provide for autistic people. I'm also an author of dystopian neurodiverse action novels, and I'm also a teacher in a special school as well.
And can you describe a bit, Chris, about what your everyday is like?
Literal answer, it depends on the day. I suppose that during my teaching days, sometimes I'm teaching mathematics, sometimes I'm teaching creative writing. Once in a while, I just talk to one of the students because all of the students at the school work out autistic. So sometimes it's just a matter of having a chat with them about life and autism and stuff. During the days when I'm working from home, sometimes I'm answering emails from people who wanted autism-related advice, and sometimes I'm working on the next novel of the Underdog series, the dystopia series I mentioned earlier. And sometimes I'm delivering speaking engagements, although these days they tend to be online via Zoom rather than actually going places. But hopefully that's going to change before too long.
And how does your faith impact your everyday life, Chris?
I'd say perhaps the biggest way that it's impacted me is the lived example of Jesus, who lived his entire life demonstrating that nobody is too bad or is unworthy or is not good enough or not in the right place in society to be considered worthy. And so, unfortunately, in the autism community, disability community, neurodiverse community, a lot of the autistic experience involves being sidelined or being seen as not quite good enough, especially if you're a young autistic person who's already been excluded from 3 different schools. So, well, if everyone is saying that I'm a bad person, then it must be a bad person. But obviously, they're not. But going back to what I was originally saying, the example of Jesus, who quite famously accepted everyone, regardless of what their background was, what their beliefs were, what their position was in society. I think right from my first steps as a Christian during my teenage years, that was something that quite influenced my opinion towards society in general. The fact that society is wide and it's varied, and it's absolutely right that there is such variety among society, but there shouldn't be some kind of hierarchy in that. There shouldn't be some levels of society that are acceptable and some that are less acceptable. And also, one great thing about Jesus was the fact that he seemed to blatantly prefer those at the bottom of the social food chain than the higher up people in authority and in the church. So, yeah, maybe that's one additional reason why I kind of prefer working with the people I do who have experienced that kind of rejection. And also another element, changing the subject entirely, is thankfulness as well. So I used to be a Sunday school leader, and on one of our training days, I was taught the teaspoon prayer. Do you know the teaspoon prayer?
I don't, no.
Okay, so teaspoon in a recipe book is abbreviated to TSP. The teaspoon prayer is where you pass around a teaspoon, and the T stands for thank you, the S stands for sorry, and the P stands for please. Because really that's the order in which we should be praying. We should be thanking God first, apologizing next, and then bringing to him what we want in our own lives. And by habit, I've ended up using that in my own prayer life. So each night I end up, almost by accident, starting off with a thank you for this, that, and the other. And honestly, I give this advice to my secular or non-religious friends as well, or at least I tell them that this is what I do and wonder if they can apply it to their own lives, because it is massively healthy going to bed, and one of the last things you do, well, the first thing you do in the going to bed process is being thankful for stuff, even if you've had a really terrible day.
Yeah. How does your church help support you in your everyday faith, Chris?
Well, the church that I used to go to pre-pandemic times, it was an amazing church. It was called the Order of the Black Sheep, which sounds a little bit cult-like, but I promise it wasn't. It was a very tongue-in-cheek name, and it was an amazing place. Sadly, I believe it's no longer, well, it's going to no longer be funded by the Church of England, but it was a small group filled with people who didn't find mainstream churches as accessible as the general Christian population. What that meant was, well, first off, the autistic population among the congregation was enormous, and also the LGBT plus population was huge. And one of our previous vicars was non-binary, and the sheer diversity that you see in the mainstream population was there, but, well, I'd say even more emphasised. And it was a supportive environment where we were allowed to ask questions. We were allowed to just outright raise the things that we didn't understand or the things we were doubting, and we knew that nobody in the church was going to judge us for it. So really, I think that's what churches in general should be like, whether they're mainstream churches with their stand-up, sit-down, singing marathons and all the rest of it. Even with those, there should be a place where people could just honestly say, actually, I'm struggling with that. Can we talk about this? And it will be greeted with the supportive, building up kind of nature that Jesus would want.
Thanks, Chris. Thanks for sharing your everyday faith story.
No problem.